Hey, it's Flango. So this was going to be a really high effort breakdown of the meta where I sort of talk about and like I was gonna play and do some research on all of these decks to understand everything and yeah, that. But I'm really tired and I haven't made a video in a while. Yeah, I'm actually probably more exhausted than I have been in a long time. But anyways, that ain't gonna stop me. So welcome to the A Clueless Person's Meta-Analysis. Alright, so like my first meta-analysis video, we're gonna do pictures, but now we're gonna do all the decks that are being seen in tournament. And I haven't really checked out Discord that much, so any really new decks, whatever, right? Okay, so we've got Dark Deal. And Dark Deal, you know, it's a demon deck. It summons a lot of Shadow Fiends. And I think I have a better chance of drawing Shadow Fiend than I do of drawing Dark Deal. Okay, that's fire. Yeah, so this is Shadow Fiend. Sure. This is a strong deck. It's very aggro-y. Oh, I didn't do this right. It's tempo. So let's actually draw a scale down here in black of tempo. Okay. So let's say that like this is like manaless right there, okay? So this is 0 mana. This is like very little mana. We're like talking like turn 2 or 3 is like the peak, right? And we're like, yeah, all over you, rawr. And then this is like mid-range. This will be like a pretty large section for mid-range because a lot of decks fall under this. This is like where all the card salads go. Let's actually just go ahead and draw a salad. I didn't happen to have green on Epic Pen, so drawing a salad is gonna be tough. But yeah, there's our salad. Maybe we'll put a spoon in there. Oh yeah, that's a spoon, all right. Really, my spoon tends to be more like that when I eat. All right, this is gonna be kind of like a meme, but it's also gonna have real information in it. So I'm really sorry for those of you who are watching my videos for the educational value. Alright, so yeah, all the card salads go right here. And card salads, you know, they're not like usually great decks, but they're also like this also can like this can be unrefined decks too, right? This could be suit, actually. And then yeah, this is just all the decks that are super unrefined. And that included a lot of the tournament decks. Um, yeah, so this whole range here is decks that like I guess like 4 to can I say 8? It's really hard to say. And then this is like it's kind of 8 plus, but not quite. Like control is complicated because control is special. And so let's fill out some of these decks and then we'll talk. So okay, Dark Deal. This is where like this is Dark Deal. I'm gonna put sure, we'll put it at the top because it's high tier, but I'm gonna explain tiers and stuff in a bit. This deck here, it's very fast, it's very solid. It's probably the deck to beat. It'll kill you by turns like 4 to 8. Like it'll kill you in this area, but the idea of this deck is just that it gets super fast board control. So like as soon as like here's your board, right? Here's your king. And then all of a sudden it's like, yee, I got pieces here, like Dark Deal, hooray. And yeah, it's really hard. And So like this deck aims to win by board control. If you talk about like Manaless can't actually get super quick board control, so it just tries to kill your king instantly. And now like normally this deck here uses that board control to kill you. And I've talked about this in the past, but there's always like a turning point where at some point it's best to use all of your resources to kill the enemy king. And I like to envision this with a graph, okay? And here's the threshold. And so what happens is your lethality goes up and up and up, and this is how much damage you could do in a burst. Like, let's say this is how much damage you could do in one turn, okay? So it goes up and up and up, and eventually it hits the threshold because you have enough cards, like, here's their king, and you have enough cards, like, surrounding them that are super expensive and enough combos and ways to get to them. So eventually you can just one-shot their king if they don't kill your board, right? Which in the early stages, it's very hard to kill something with 40 health, which is why this card right here is so strong. And also, I mean, it didn't have to be Shadow Lurker. It just happened to be that Shadow Lurker is the one that you can cheat out with Dark Deal. But if you were able to cheat out Bog Dweller, or, I mean, you can even cheat out those Scorpions. And Scorpion Cocoon deck is just a slower version of Dark Deal. And actually, I would put it here. Although it could, I don't know, it should go here. Like that's, I won't put it because it won't be meta ever, but it would go here in this slot, and it would just be a worse version of Dark Deal. But okay. So anyways, back to this. So provided you're getting your board control and your enemy can't be finishing your cards, then eventually you'll get here. And then at this point, there's no reason to keep building board, right? There's no reason to do anything. There's no reason to kill the enemy cards and try to make a bigger board advantage. You should just kill them right then and there, right? And like, yeah, that. Now, you just need to hit this threshold. So if we do like damage I can deal, eventually you're going to want to actually start to sacrifice that damage and it'll go down. And it can go down really rapidly. It can go down like this. And I don't know if you guys have done any derivatives or physics or anything, but the amount of damage dealt here is equal to the area underneath this graph. So it would initially go up. Well, it would initially go up slowly, and then it would super peak out right here. And it would take a while, but you would eventually hit that curve, right? And now, as long as this is actually just 2 turns or whatever, you're going to be hitting the curve where this hits 0. And if you can time that right, then you're going to look like, well, you're probably going to look like, honestly, you're probably going to actually look like this. And then this section right here is where you decided to go all in. Does that make sense? So like you might be killing him in 2 or 3 turns, but like there is a turning point where at some point this much damage, if you just do, like, okay, let's say you did nothing, and then you pop up to this amount of damage, then this area right here, all that stuff that you can get in the last little second, will get you the rest of the way there. And so maybe this isn't the damage number. Maybe it's up here, right? I don't really care. But the point is, like, you might have some stragglers. You have another card in your hand that you can hit with. And so the idea is, like, if you lower your opponent to 2 health, yeah, you can just chase them and kill them. And so that's what this deck should be doing. It should be, like, getting board control, and then it gets to that turning point really quickly, and then it's like, bop, bop, bop. All right, I play a card, and it bops you, and you're dead. So that's this deck. And, yeah, I think this deck will be optimized with, like, Icarus instead of Queen of Thorns, unless this deck becomes the meta. Which, if it does, then it'll just become like full like Queen of Thorns spam demon stuff, so you can always have more demons, and it'll be whack. But yeah, that's my insights on that deck. Okay, next up. Yeah, I guess we. Okay, first we'll talk about Bog Dweller. Bog Dweller's in the same. I drew a really good Bog Dweller last time. I don't want to have to make a worse one. Hang on, let me pull up my reference image here. I'm looking at the one right up there. So, okay, we go like this. I'm not satisfied with that. There's a bit of a curve, and then it's like this. Oh, that's a bit too much. There we go. And then, it's got a pointier snout, but whatever. And then it kind of just falls off. And then there's like this thing going on. Oh, this is much worse. And he's actually got an arm, which I didn't draw last time, and I'm just not going to draw again this time. And then he's got these things coming back. And then he's got an eye. And he looks kind of grumpy. But I'm going to make him happy. Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's not the best, but what are you going to do? Um, Alright, so this deck, it works in a much different way. It's a duelist deck, if built properly. And it pops a card down at the bottom like an ephemeral garden, and then it goes in. And it's like, I'm on top of you, haha, and then I can heal myself with all my cards. You have to deal with a big damagey card. And that's fine. It actually kind of kills you slower than this deck here. So the curves, okay, if we're looking at curves, the damage that this thing does is flat, right? More or less. I mean, it puts a Wraith Blade on, so it's kind of like this. That's the damage curve of Bog Dweller. Now, of this deck, it's kind of more like, yeah, I can't do any... Oh, shit, I meant to change colors. It's kind of like, yeah, I can't do anything to you, and then like, yeah, I could technically do damage to you, but I won't, and then it's like, yeah, I'm doing damage to you now. So like the time it takes, like the way that you build around these two decks is very different, and this is what makes it kind of difficult to play control. And it isn't too bad because we'll talk about that when we talk about control. There's a reason I skipped control. Um, but yeah, I think that like the way that you play against these two decks is slightly different in the sense that like this deck. Oh, I'm gonna be like yellow for now. Actually, I'll be black. This deck right here, it's kind of like you have to like get early board control. Maybe you have to cheat out your own cards to be honest, but you can play like Geomancer or something to kill all of them. You can play like a super versatile or mobile or units to like kings, super mobile kings to do whatever you want to do here. That works. This deck, mobile kings are okay, but this deck really, really, really has no problem spending its time to just remove your movement. This deck, if it's removing your movement, that's a pretty hard tempo hit, honestly, on it. This deck, no. Like, this deck is just like, yeah, I use everything on killing you. This deck, you should really just outduel it, put on a barrier. Barrier's great. Barrier's okay against this card too, but yeah. Oh, no, 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 no. Okay, 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 okay. Okay. Okay, so next is we'll talk about a deck that I've kind of pioneered before, and it's Shenlong, and I don't know what Shenlong looks like or anything, but it's kind of manaless, and its goal is, well, it doesn't have to be manaless, it can be anywhere in like this range, but it's kind of like an aggro Shenlong. I'm just gonna write it. Okay, so, and it's like, it goes for the enemy mana, and then it outvalues with cheap cards, because it can do that, right? Like if you're just killing the enemy mana source, then you go deep. And it doesn't need to outvalue necessarily. It just like goes for the enemy mana and then it has Shenlong. And by cheap cards, I mean like the most expensive card is probably Cephalopod. And I say Cephalopod because Psycho Fiend can be stolen. And you can use like Exchange or something in Castle Knight. Like you're gonna be killing enemy mana with stuff like Castle Knight, and then you can exchange one of the Castle Knights and then you still have a Castle Knight left over for some sort of like board control. It's not much, but it's something. And then you can spend that mana on Psycho Fiend or Cephalopod, and then the rest is history. Um, yeah, so I think this deck is going to be like the last sort of meta aggro deck that people aren't talking about. And I think that's kind of it. Oh, I think that Undying aggro will be a thing too. I can only think to draw Undying in one way. Yeah, okay. So Undying decks use a Crypt King or Progenitor, and they just revive their Luminous Wraith and then kill you with it. That's pretty much the entire deck. They can also use Azrael, and then they can like hit you and then explode it, and that's really obnoxious. But that's more or less the deck. There was another Azrael deck that I didn't like in the tournament, but I don't remember what it was. It was like Azrael. There were some Wraith Blades, but it wasn't really Undying at all, actually. And I forget why they had Azrael in it. It was like, what's the one that's like Undying? Demon? No. Hang on, I'm gonna check. Yeah, it had Barrier, Miracle Mage, Burial, Illusionist, King. Oh, it was Undying. That's right. Azrael is Demon, and yeah, I think it was just using Azrael for like the kill and jump stuff, but I don't remember exactly. But that's more or less Undying aggro. So yeah, here's our Undying. Okay. Now I think we can sort of move on. I think that all these decks will be viable, by the way. And I'll talk a little bit about, like, this is going to be a behemoth of a video, by the way. This is, yeah, I'll talk about the matchups and stuff, and I'll make a big mess. Don't you worry. Okay. Do I have any other sort of mid-game cards to talk, or decks to talk about? I think like an Azrael, like Trigger Happy is probably not going to be meta. It'll be kind of a soup. Um, Deep Space Warrior aggro, it's a thing. I don't know. It's kind of in the faster section because it's like turn 0 on top of you. It's not for me, but there's your Deep Space Warrior. I don't know, man. I can't remember what it looks like. All right, so it's gonna be played by people who like, I don't know, don't like winning. I'll talk about that in the matchups section. Anything else I have to talk about first? I think Aqua Hydra could totally make a comeback. I think Chimera aggro might take this spot if I play it enough. Probably not, because I probably won't. But I think Chimera aggro is actually just better. Anyways, let's talk about control. Okay, yeah. So like maybe this deck could have moved over here. Things aren't like mid-game decks aren't really, I don't know, like a mana cheat deck which can exist, or like turn 2 you're sacrificing your own card. You could even do this with Volcano, honestly. And then you could do it turn 1. But or Miracle Mage or not Miracle, whatever. Crystal Sage. Okay. And then like you're going for like some 40 mana card, but then I mean you might as well just play that one, right? So anyways, you can do an aggro 40, but it's kind of just meh. Um so then on the control-y side, we have Zera. This guy right here. Now, Zera is played Oasis right now. I seriously think that um, Wasteland is really good. But whatever. I don't play it very often. And it's kind of difficult to optimize. So I don't know, I'm not gonna say anything yet until I get to super optimize it and play it against the current meta. But yeah. Zera, he's pretty good. So Oasis Zera, we'll draw a sun here to show that it's Oasis. Alright, so Oasis Zera here. He is. Well, what do I have to say about him? Really controlly. Um, Building this deck requires knowing what this is, more or less, and like what the ratio is, right? Now, the way that you play around some of these decks, like, okay, these two are probably going to be the most common. Like, this is a ranked ladder. Like, in the actual like game, people just play really bad stuff because there's nothing, like, there's no reason to try. There's no rank or anything, right? So people just kind of play card salads. So then you're playing against this. And we have to understand that playing around this, well, now we know what turn we have to be wary of, so that's helpful. Um, and that's sort of why I put this in here. But yeah, so as you can see, all these are in more or less the same range, which means that it's actually pretty easy to build control right now. Like, we all know that we just need to come online early. So what are cards that come online early? Well, well, we can get some 20 cost cards. Actually, maybe I'll. Yeah, sure. All right. Oh shoot. Well, don't email me, guys. All right. Let's make a deck here and talk. Cause it's been a while since I made a deck around this range, to be honest. So we can get cards like, I guess, Deep Sea Devil, which, I mean, obviously you would be in Aquatic, and this is why I think Aquatic is really good right now. But I digress. So we can get cards like Giant Scorpion in Wasteland better. Um, is Flame Lord acceptable? Probably not, no. Barrier. Barrier comes online pretty early, even now. It used to come online even earlier. We can get, I mean, Crystal Sage is pretty bad. Is it though? I wonder if like putting yourself on Crystal but not your opponents against some of these higher damage decks is really good. I think it's pretty good. Maybe not really good, but pretty good. So like you could run King Crystal Sage, but like I think King Zera is fine, and then you just Crystal Sage and then put Zera on it. The problem with that is that you're not on an Oasis anymore, so you're not gaining any mana. So it probably won't work. But I like to think that Crystal Sage would be a good card. You could also maybe run like Cephalopod or Inferno. Inferno does pretty good damage, so it can it fight Shadow Lurker? I don't think it loses. I think it wins actually. Do I not have Shadow Lurker? It's here, it's here. Okay, yeah, it does win. So Shadow Lurker has 17 attack. Inferno has 21. Mm, Complicated. If Inferno swings first, 21 times 2 is enough to kill. Because it does 21. So then this card's at 20, and then it regens 1, and then it goes up to 21. Oh, it recovers 2. Oh my god. Okay, so Inferno just barely doesn't kill Shadow Lurker, which honestly really sucks. I'd like to see this nerfed by 1 health now, just to produce some counterplay. But there's enough ways to beat Shadow Lurker, so probably won't happen. Anyways, I think you could still maybe rely on Inferno, use one other card. Actually, a really cool card if you can get 2 Infernos for 2 turns on Shadow Lurkers is spells. Wait. Oh, okay. It does those sounds now. Um, this card right here would be cool. It's a little overkill though. You don't necessarily need 12. You could do. Oh, that's actually the cheapest one right now, right? No, didn't they make a? Okay, the one that does what's it called? I'm sorry, guys. It's like wave or shock of something. This one, shockwave. It was both. Yeah, so this one does 6 attack and it's huge range. So you'd be hitting your own guys, which kind of sucks, but they still wouldn't die, I don't think. 6 plus 17. How much health did they have? They had more than that, right? Yep, way more. So yeah, they would live with 4 health. Um, so you can make something like that work, maybe. Anyways, talking about more early game cards. I mean, even Raiden's kind of okay. Shadow Lurker can be kind of beat if you just back up by a space and then hit it with like Forest Wyvern. Space Tempest would be really good. Um, you can still run Giant Scorpion. Kaze comes online early, moves things around. Geomancer comes online early. Like these were the cards that I was gonna recommend mostly. Is Kaze, Geomancer. Maybe Spirit Warrior is not so bad, but it probably is. Um, yeah. You can even run Flash. Flash. I mean, the problem with Flash is like it only removes one of them. You kind of need like Fatigue or something, but obviously that's not gonna work because Wasteland. But this is kind of why I'm gonna recommend Wasteland Control in a bit. And yeah, so like stuff like Icarus, well, not even Icarus. You can use you can heal up with stuff like Great Monarch though. Castle Knight's still fine, comes online early. Like there's a lot of online early cards. Crabulus can like kind of duel, in a like Ocean can duel and beat those cards. But anyways, I've kind of shown you how it looks. Like I'm not got the video is not about that. The video is about this. So okay, back to this. Oh, here we go. So we have a whole bunch of stuff. And yeah, so that's how building against these two decks looks. These decks are very different. Turn 1, this deck is on top of you. Now you can still run Barrier, which is good against 3 of these decks, and I mean, kind of 4 really. And really, actually 5. So like, okay, let's group these decks a little bit. These two decks are the same thing. They're kind of a duelist deck. This one's just a little bit better. Frankly, I'm going to say that. This deck has its merits. It can hit you on turn 1. It's actually a little bit faster. You can go manaless and it kind of balances out and it's a little bit different, but for the most part, they're similar. This deck here is kind of similar, so it like kind of belongs in the same group, but not really. This deck here is so complicated, right? And just by using this king, you've actually beat this deck. This deck plans to just outvalue you by killing your mana, but your mana in this case is your king. Now, one thing it does do very well is it um it puts your king on a square where it can't get mana. So it's not like the end of the world for Shenlong. It's just very difficult. And Shenlong is probably going to default to just like, that graph? Well, Shenlong is just going to hope that whatever it gets by just hitting you every turn is equal to your threshold. Like it's just going to hope that it eventually hits your threshold. Or maybe I should say eventually hits your threshold like that. It's kind of complicated how the damage will work, and that's why we play the game, because whether it's going to be like this or like this is the difference between winning or losing that match. Like you've got here your threshold, here's your thing. Okay, if Shenlong's on top of you round 1, does 20 damage, right? Bop. Okay. Well, I guess let's make some dots first. Bop. Okay. Second round, if he's still on top of you and he gets another card, we're going up. Third round, if he gets 2 cards and you haven't done anything, well, all of a sudden, we're up past the threshold, right? And if he's just Shenlong is like running and chasing you every turn, we're not gonna hit the threshold, and you can kill every card on the way. But anyways, yeah. So this king is decent into this, and it puts this deck in like normally its plan is different, so it's kind of complicated, obviously, but overall, I whatever. Overall, this deck here will beat most of these decks, and I'm kind of doing everything in the wrong order. But yeah, building this, like building a control deck is like the whole point of control is to beat meta, right? And so control actually is supposed to have like 70% win rate. That's the point of control. So how do you beat control? Well, you cross it up, and that's why you play the suit. It's all an attempt to beat the control, right? And that's why you play this deck, for example. Maybe this deck is harder to like, well, not harder to build against, but like if you're built to beat these decks, then you play this deck, then you win. You've beat the meta, right? So, and like these decks are also similar, and that's why you can play this deck. This deck is like, yay, we just we just beat the deck that beats most of the decks that beat control or that are meta. So, yeah. Um, that's how metas work, by the way, in case you didn't know. It's basically just a really big rock paper scissors game, more or less. Where like this is like all balancing to an equilibrium, where 70% of the time control will beat aggro. Aggro will maybe have like a 60% advantage over the suit, and it's probably 55. Let's be honest. If we're talking high sample size, 55 is still a high win rate. And we're gonna beat this also 70% of the time, let's say. And then we're just gonna balance out, right? So, actually, let's say it's not even 75. Let's say it's 65. So most people are gonna play control, but a certain number of people has to play this to beat control enough, and a certain number of people has to play this because when more people start to play this, then this starts to become better. And we're just gonna balance out, right? Where like your average person is probably playing control, and then there's some of this going on, and then there's some of this going on. And these, like, what people are playing is based on this graph right here. So if I back up a little bit, actually, I'll make this graph at the end, just for you. Okay. So, I'm really trying to think of a deck that goes in here, but I don't know. Maybe I should have moved these decks in. Okay, so a deck that goes in here. Let's say Swamp. Not Swamp Aggro, which is over here, and I also should be meta in my opinion. I'm mostly talking about tournament decks here. Most of the tournament decks, like, I mean, Plant. There was a Plant deck. The Plant deck was kind of... I didn't like the way that worked. Yeah, that's good enough. Maybe we can do one more? Nope, we can't. Actually, what if it was like... Or just like that. Okay. I'm sorry, guys. It's more about the drawings. Okay. So there was a Plant deck. Plant would go here. It's not really going to be meta, I don't think. But that's a good example. If there's a Swamp deck with like Giant Scorpion or Great Oak Spider, we can just put like a Spider in there. Yeah. Okay. So Great Oak Spider type Scorpion-y deck, insect deck, that'll work well. In this sort of area, you can use Cocoon. That's probably the big one, actually. It's the Cocoon that surrounds it. Um, that would be like this sort of area here. Okay. So now we get into a card called Star Eater. And oh man, I forget how to draw Star Eater. I'm literally just gonna draw a star. So Star Eater's complicated. You can have Star Eater decks over here. Okay. Here's Star Eater. So, yeah, Star Eater can be over here. And it can be super like late game, rar, I'm late game. Um, oh, I found a deck over here. So, Taurus Dragon. Although, Taurus Dragon is kind of the king of this deck too. If you have like a Taurus Dragon actually just Force in general, Force as a combo, which involves Star Eater sometimes, and this is sort of where I'm going. But Star Eater as king kind of goes here. It's kind of like, oh, let's go late. Let's play all the late game cards. Like, nobody can kill me forever, so it's fine. And Star Eater is a potential good counter to this card because it can get rid of all of them at the same time. And it can just like run like one explosion to do that. Star Eater is less good against like Shenlong, and it's really bad against like side jump cards and decks that like play one card and then poke. So this deck right here, so good against Star Eater. Um, Less good against this card because this card can always hit. I don't know. It's like this card heals a lot, and it's kind of immune to this playstyle. But Star Eater less so. This one's also good though, because side jump like Star Eater actually can't hit. Anyways, what are we talking about? We're talking about, yes, Force. So okay, for the Force, I will draw a lightsaber and red because red is the color of lightsabers. Actually, there are blue lightsabers, but I need more red in this drawing. Alright. In retrospect, this looks wonky. Oh, it cut off at the top. Sorry, guys. But yeah, so here's my lightsaber. This is the Force. Force decks are pretty much the most mid-range you can get. They get to Death from Beyond or Taurus Dragon and a Force card, which there's this card here is a Force card, and then you have like Psycho Fiend, and then you have Cephalopod, right? You get to a Force card, and you're like, hey, it's time to just swing and hit every time, right? Usually it's Taurus Dragon, you're like move, swing, and you can just run Taurus Dragon as your king, have Force cards, and it's just some free hits, man. And then this card, and kind of these decks, but this deck specifically is like, all right, it's time for me to play Sludge, and that's how I get my finishing run. So like we can go back to this graph, right? Here's our graph. This one, it's like, yeah, I can do damage, I can do damage. Okay, I'm activating. I'm gonna do more damage. Actually, yeah, it's like I can do damage, sure, but here's the threshold. It's up here, and it's like, okay, I'm halfway. So first turn, I'm gonna hit you, but since I use Sludge, second turn, I get to do that same amount of damage. So it's like that. This graph is difficult because I'm mixing potential and the amount of damage done. It's kind of like more like, okay, I'm not doing any damage. I'm getting board control. Okay, I'm halfway there, and then I'm there, right? Like it's kind of like one turn kill, but or like whatever. But like it's not. Like this is just how the game is played. You burst the enemy down. And if you want to play a card game like that, you can also talk about Elder Scrolls Legends, where the enemy like draws a card every 5 damage you do. So instead of doing like 5 damage and then 5 damage and then 5 damage, like one at a time type thing, so they can draw cards and come back, what you do is you build up a huge board and then you kill them in one turn. Now with this deck, like you're kind of doing that, right? You're building up your combo, and then turn 1, you're like, haha, I just hit you for 22 damage. And then turn 2, you're like, haha, I hit you for 22 damage. And then you're like, you know what? If I just sludge you right now, I just kill you, right? So like it's kind of the same way. Like you're doing all your damage as a burst, and yeah, that. That's all I got. Sort of how this game works right now, or more or less. Um, Complicated to explain, but yeah. So this is all happening, and these decks here often do well against these decks, as I was saying. Partly like this deck here is a mix-up, so it'll do well against control because control, like what control really does is it counters the meta. Now, if the meta, like if these cards become really strong in the meta, then control will counter this. if the meta is like 50% this and 50% this, well, control just counters bad play, really. It counters like greed, and you can kind of build control as anti-aggro or anti-control, or like yeah, like you can also do that. You can build like anti-control, control, like the Star Eater could beat Zera, or actually vice versa. Um, really both can work. Depends on your deck. And if you go Wasteland Zera, and I'm just gonna draw Wasteland like this. Okay, there's my Wasteland. Um, yeah, if you go Wasteland, then you beat all of this. And I don't even know if I'll talk about that. I kind of talked about it in when I was talking about like what goes into this deck. But yeah, so all these decks, let's say they make up our meta. And so like Wasteland Control has a really good, like a really easy chance building other control decks, right? It honestly probably beats this one. Maybe not actually. Maybe this one outvalues this one. It's hard to say. Um, how do I want to do this? I think I'm just gonna go ahead and just murder this drawing. All right, so let's talk about. Okay, let's say that this is our meta. Okay, everything in here is the universe of the meta. Now we've got some cards along every range. Let's talk about what decks seem the strongest. Well, this deck and this deck. Actually, maybe I'll just use yellow. It's this deck, um, and this deck are all very popular, right? So more or less, you would try to find a deck that beats these. Now that's very difficult to do. Something in the middle could beat this, and could outspeed this, and beat this. So like maybe Insect is the solution. You can use Cocoon, you can get cards that can fight this or whatever, right? I don't necessarily think that's the solution, but it could be. Um, Force would be okay as well. You can kind of force the king of this deck, and you can force this guy into being like a diagonal away from you, and then maybe you could do force with this card as your king, or some other side jump card as your king. It doesn't really matter to be honest. Um, but something like that could work. Also, this deck, it could potentially be built to beat this, and it beats this, and it beats this. Or you could just say, wait, if this deck is popular and strong, why don't I just play it? And I'll just play it better than all the other control players. Because it can beat this, and it can beat this pretty easily. Not as easily as this one, to be honest, because you have access to like Giant Scorpion and stuff, which, again, duel this card pretty well. And also block and duel this card pretty well. But I digress. You could also say this deck is really good. I don't think that this deck is like, I don't think that that's the thing. I think it definitely goes this way. But if you're expecting it to be more like these decks, then this deck is really good. Um, so yeah, I mean, again, it's gonna be an equilibrium, right? And this deck actually seems really strong. And until people like really figure out how to beat it, then this deck is probably going to take up the majority of the decks. And by the majority, I don't mean like 50% of players are going to play this deck. I mean like, I don't know, probably 15%, right? And that's pretty good because the soup is going to be 30%. People just playing random soup cards is 30, or soup decks. And then maybe this will be like 10%. Again, this is like in a ranked ladder scenario. On the actual like game, you'll just face a whole bunch of random stuff. I think this deck has promise and can do better and better into the meta. I think that this deck right here is probably your best bet if you're betting on like beating the meta. And I think that like 5% of people will do that maybe. I don't know, I'm giving really high numbers. It's probably going to be like 2.5, right? And this deck is the other most going to be the other most overplayed deck, and I guess I'll put that at also around 15. Now, after that, I mean 1%, 2%, 0.5%, honestly 0.25%. Um, 2%, maybe 3, 0.25, 2%. I don't know, I'm hopeful it should be like 1%. Complicated. This incorporates a lot of decks. Okay, so yeah. And by the way, like this deck is ramping up into this, so like they're very similar in style. But okay, here's our more or less like our ratios, right? And these don't add up to 100 at all, and this is honestly going to be more like 60%, well 50%, let's say. But the idea here is not that. Like the true the true victories are the friends we made along the way. But yeah, so overall, like here's my these are the meta decks right now. Or here are the decks we saw in the tournament with a couple of decks that I considered bringing and like to talk about. Um, Now it's kind of time for that graph I promised. So let's just make it. So here we go. We've got control. We've got mid-gamey stuff. And we've got aggro. Now what do I think more or less I guess I don't know. I'll figure out which one's which. What do I think more or less is what's going on? So I think control. Let's make this one control. Nah, control always goes on the top. I think control versus aggro right now. If you're running Star Eater or a deck that ramps up to Star Eater into aggro right now, you're doing really well. I think also if you're able to sorry. If you're able to like just run barrier, frankly, I think barrier is fine in this meta. Really good. Wings is kind of meh. I wouldn't really run wings. But yeah, as long as you're like teching barrier and you're getting early cards out like Giant Scorpion or something. I don't know. I'd have to look at it again. Follow previous me's recommendation. Um, I think that this is actually the most dominant matchup. I'm happy to put it at 70%. It's just so dominant if you play it properly and you're teching right and you're just like using well-built control. So I wasn't happy with that C. Whatever. 70%, right? So this is really solid. Um I don't even really want this C in here. I kind of do. I'll put it like sorry guys. C. All right. So then obviously this is aggro. Aggro beats mid-range stuff like actually mid-range stuff just sucks. Does aggro beat mid-range significant portion of the time? I'm gonna put it at 70. Oh shoot. Like I think that this is also equally dominant. And I think this is like the weakest link in the game. Control can stave off mid-game pretty well unless like there's a mid-game combo I'm not thinking of. And so let's say like honestly, let's say 55. Alright, and we could solve this and tell you that this many players is playing this, and this many should play this, and this many should play this. But I'm trying to think like, is there any like sort of combo-y decks that I'm not thinking of? Not really. So yeah, let's just go at it. So this is what I think is the current meta type thing. So I mean, I would say like don't play this deck, unless of course like 90% of your decks are that you face are control, right? And probably it won't be because this is solid and this is solid. But again, there's an equilibrium, so maybe we can solve that equilibrium. I'll do like a really quick like I don't even really 100% remember how you do this, but basically, let's start at control. Let's say 100 people are playing control. Okay. So how many people want to play this? Well, currently 100% of the people are playing Control. Oh yeah, we do it by percent, by the way. So 100% of the people are playing Control. Um, so how many people want to play this? Well, now 100% do. But okay, let's say that there's not that. Let's say we're at 33, 33, 33. So if half of your matchups, well, a third of your matchups, I guess, mirrors are 50-50 though. So half of the matchups that matter are here and here, then I mean, you're just gonna stop playing this deck and just play this deck. So this one goes up, and oh shoot, I forget how this. Hang on. Okay. So this goes up and this goes down, and then it's like, I think I'll probably say that this ends at like 15, 50. Now when 50% of the players are playing Control, then people are like, wait, why am I playing this deck when I can play this deck? And I mean, I don't need to tell you how it happens. I just think that overall, I think probably what we will actually end up with does look something like this. So, yeah, I think that this is like more or less the percent of players that will play what. Now, what does that mean for you? I mean, it means that I didn't do the math because frankly, what should happen is that every sort of deck balances out to like 50% win rate because as more people are playing this deck, I mean as less people are playing this deck, then this like and more people are playing this deck, then this plus this is about 50%. And we can 100% do the math on that. I just haven't bothered. In fact, this right here means like you might as well just like be even, which I think is probably correct in domain. If you're playing aggro, you're going even, except for like if we're actually factoring in soup. Oh, and actually maybe I should do that. So here's our like our tournament setup. Okay, they're like these are the top players. If you are playing for money, if it's an invitational and I'm inviting the top 6 players from the last tournament, then this is this is what's gonna happen. And this is what you should build around and be like, okay, this is this. If you're bringing 3 decks, you should bring 2 of this and 1 of this, except some people who are going to bring 2 of this and 1 of this. And some people are going to bring 1, 1, 1. But like the majority of players are going to bring 2, 1. Okay? But that's, again, okay, whatever. So now we add in soup. I'm just going to have soup be this like ethereal thing on this side and this side. Okay. So, aggro just denominates soup. It's like 80%. Soup is badly built decks. So soup just can't handle this aggro stuff. It might even be 90%. Let's be honest. Control actually soup can sometimes beat control because control is built around beating these decks, which is why control, as you will see, is the best deck. Right? Like it beats more aggro and it beats more mid range, or it doesn't lose very much to mid range. So yeah, it's built to beat these decks, but a properly teched control for these decks actually really sucks against soup. And you can build anti-soup control, which is like I run wings, I run like 1, 2 of everything. Like there was an anti-soup control actually in the tournament, but whatever. Um, not like regular anti-stuff control. Honestly, like it's plus 50 or 55. I mean, like 55%. That's it. It's probably still gonna win because it's soup, but like frankly, and because a good control player is playing control properly. But yeah, no. Let's say it loses to soup a good portion of the time. Um, oh yeah, I am not actually writing it somewhere where you can see. So 55%. And mid range into soup is kind of complicated too, because Mid-range, as you saw for a good portion of it, is soup. So, I mean, it's just a better version of soup in some ways right now, so I'm just going to give it a plus 65%. So, what does this mean for you on the ranked ladder? Well, it means that maybe you should play this, or it means that you should balance your aggro or your control deck so that it's anti-soup. And if it's anti-soup, then honestly, it can be like it can be 80 to it can be 90 easy. Um, and obviously you're gonna have to make some sacrifices there. So I mean, your 80 to 90 here might only be plus 60. I mean, even then, like if it's improperly teched, it could just be 50, just like even 50%, man. So yeah, that's sort of what I have to say here. Um, yeah, I really don't have. If I had like my old thing, I could go over like every matchup in the game, but I haven't played most of them. I've only played so many matchups to be honest, and frankly, if I had done a whole bunch of research to make this video, then sure, that would be what we would be looking at right now. But I haven't, so I got nothing to say. I just I'm just here. Thanks for watching. It's been a real pleasure doing this meta talk. And I'm just sitting here thinking about like, do I have anything else to say? And I really don't think I do. All right. Peace.